Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Yakuza Fiancé Season 1, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. We opened up with this interesting conversation between Subaki and Yoshino, because Subaki brings up the whole fact of Kirishima tried to look for you at that funeral back when you were 12, and she's like, really? He's like, yeah, apparently he never saw you, but now it's kind of a thing of, does that mean he liked Yoshino all the way back then? It's kind of the big question, and that kind of plays into Yoshino being like, she's never quite sure what is on Kirishima's mind, because he's such a hard person to read, especially because Subaki brings up well, what do you guys talk about? Does he ever talk about his exes? And she's like, no, the only thing we ever talk about is food and current events. And now it's I guess it's a thing of, if you kind of understand maybe something about his exes, maybe that'll give you a little insight into who he is, because it's he is such an enigma. He knows a lot about Yoshino, probably because he does a lot of research on people, but he's always been very careful about what he says and when he says it. So he's never dropped a lot of info about himself, and that's kind of what Yoshino's trying to figure out, because Subaki kind of got her thinking about a lot of that stuff of, it's the whole situation of whether anything's going to happen between you and Kirishima, whether or not you come back home to Osaka. At the end of the day, one might influence the other. That's even if you do come back to Osaka when it's all said and done, unless you figured out this whole Kirishima situation, it's still going to be something that follows you back home. It'll never get rid of the root of the problem, which is you don't know what his deal is, what he's getting out of this, whether what he's feeling for you is genuine or if that's just him playing some act. It's does he legitimately like you, or is he obsessed with you, which it seems like he can be at times. So comes at a very interesting time because it's summer vacation. We did, once again, kind of playing into what I was saying about, you learn certain information about Kirishima at very specific points in times, only when he decides to drop information, because Yoshino sees him talking to some girls, but the moment the girls see her, they take off, and she's like, well, those girls are older than me, and they're up here talking to me like I'm the older person in this situation. But it's I was talking to those girls because there are classes being held during the summer, and so there needs to be someone here that's part of the disciplinary committee to kind of guide anyone here. And it's I'm part of the disciplinary committee. I wonder, is he the head honcho of the disciplinary committee, or is he just part of it? And she's like, wait, you discipline? He's like, yeah, I might break laws outside of school, but generally speaking, in school, I obey them. And she's like, usually it's kind of the inverse for most people. So, but it's apparently the girls, they talk to him, but he doesn't always talk back to them. That's why he's his conversation with Yoshino, even though they only talk about food and the news, he's I enjoy it, because the fact of the matter is, if I didn't, I wouldn't talk to you. He's girls would normally just hold the conversation themselves and I just listen. But the fact is, I do really like you because I'm willing to have an actual conversation with you, because that was a whole thing that, Subaki had brought up last episode of he does not talk to people. If he had his way, he wouldn't talk to people, but he makes an exception, a massive exception when it comes to Yoshino. Because essentially, Kirishima was all the girls, some girls confessed to him before, but he turned them all down, so now they kind of just don't bother doing that anymore because they just assume they're going to get rejected. But it's oh, do you have any male friends? And he's kind of no. And he ends up kind of admitting that Yoshino's kind of his first friend. And now Yoshino's kind of wait. She's like, wait, the way you're just talking to me, am I... Because she's you're kind of treating me like one of your guy friends. He's like, I guess so. She's like, so does that mean you would have started developing feelings, you would have first fallen in love with whoever became your first friend? He's like, yeah, I guess if that's how you're going to put it like that. And now she's like, wait, does he even know the difference between romantic love and friendship? Because now she's like, am I just a friendship? Is he contorting those two things and treating them like the same thing when in actuality are vastly different things? So... it's kind of, once again, interesting timing, because we kind of dealt with something similar to that in the most recent episode of Dan, where Ken kind of recognized, wait, Momo's kind of cute. That's interesting. I was so focused on just having my first friend, I kind of didn't notice, wait, she's a cute girl. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Once again, how much of that is true? How much of that is just bullshit that Kirishima is spewing? There's that. There's also, we get introduced to a new character now who's in the intro because she's the person that Kirishima is having sex with in the opening. So I was like, oh, interesting. She was a child actress that retired. Her parents were working in America, so she moved there for a bit. She won some beauty contests, and she's kind of back, kind of working it because she was like a news anchor on a very prestigious news network at some point in time. So she's kind of come back to do something similar to that. I don't know if she's necessarily fully restarting her career, but she seems very I think that's such an interesting artistic choice they're making with some of the girls like Subaki and now have those different eyes in comparison to all these other characters, even in comparison to Yoshino, but also you have someone like Shoma who's in that same vein. I mean, to be fair, it's Kirishima and Yoshino, despite their eyes not having that same artistic style that theirs do, they still have very unique eyes in their own regards as well, coloring and all that wise. So it is just something kind of interesting. But now it's really interesting because she presents a certain way, oh, I'm this very I guess conservative would be she puts on a front to be this very oh my god front, but she's kind of a not bad person, but it's a front that she puts up because she's yeah, I know all the girls in this group think of me as a schemer. She's so what if it is? What if I am? Because she's she says her boyfriend who she dated a while back, he's another person. I can't remember if he was an actor or something. His name is Ozu, but she's yeah, they broke up because he called her an attention person because a very oh, I didn't know you were such a attention hungry because she they took a very specific job or something like that. Or no, it's because I think because she entered that beauty contest. So, but she seems the type of person that does like the attention, and she's right, yeah, I might be a schemer, but yeah, I work hard to make it so that people like me. I am the most successful person in our group. So she doesn't have the greatest personality. It seems like she kind of has a little bit of a nasty personality. That is just very surface level what we got. But Kirishima happens to be at that place, and some of the girls at the group knows Kirishima, but it seems like him and now don't. But it turns out, yeah, they did. She heard about who Kirishima was. She's known him for a while. Because I think she's heard rumors about him. Because I think they went to the same middle school and everything. The same middle school that Yoshino learned about was that episode 2 where he an incident happened where he beat the ever-living shit out of a whole bunch of people. So ever since then, I think now had gotten attached to him. So when they got older, they the last time they saw each other was 3 years ago, specifically when she came back to Japan for a little bit. So it was kind of a very I don't know if it's a very romantic relationship or it's a physical one. We do see that short-haired woman he's having a fling with, where he was talking about Yoshino, the same woman I commented on, yo, the episode's opening with him going down on her. We haven't seen her since then. So has he stopped all his flings completely or not? Because that was the whole thing Yoshino had brought up to Subaki about how it's yeah, he kind of has his flings, but once again, not really anything concrete about his exes, which we've now been introduced to one, but I don't know if they'd either did Kirishima look at it as a legitimate relationship? Was it just a fling, or was it kind of a friends with benefits type of thing, or what? Does seem like it stuck out to now, but it's yeah, both of them were pretending they didn't know each other. Well, she was first, but then he was no, let me play along. So, but he's yeah, here's my card. Oh, it happens to be on the back of my number, my contact info. Oh, it's on the back of a card of someone of note. And he goes home and he sees that on her social media, she talks about going to Osaka. Yoshino had the whole thing of, oh, let's go back to Osaka for Bon in August. And he's well, could we do it in July? So he's timing it all out. What he's trying to get from her, I don't know. Because maybe that's why they started their situation all those years ago. That maybe he was trying to get something from her back then as well because of maybe who she's connected to or something. Or maybe there's a more recent development where it's well, this happened organically in the past and I'm just using that to my advantage now. Or maybe it was all orchestrated last time and is continuing to be orchestrated now. Obviously does not tell Yoshino that's what's up. But yeah. his first time. Well, I don't remember if he said this was his first time in Osaka, or at the very least, he's never been to Osaka very much. So they're going around doing a little shopping and stuff, and they end up running into Shoma at a specific restaurant. Shoma knew, like, hey, if you're coming home, you're going to stop at this very specific spot for some food. And obviously Shoma is giving those glares to Kirishima, which she had Kirishima promise that he wouldn't start any shit in Osaka, that he'd be on his best behavior. And she's like, cool, the moment I made that declaration to him, of course we'd run into the one person where that would be an issue. So, because she already knows how Shoma feels about Kirishima. So, obviously, introducing Kirishima to some of the other, like, I was about to call them Ajumas, but it's like, no, like, that's Korean, not Japanese. But the older ladies and guys there, and they're like, oh my god, he's so handsome, is this your boyfriend? She's like, no, nothing like that. It's like, oh, I'm actually from Tokyo. And they're like, oh, you're definitely not from Osaka. It's like, oh, you're so handsome. And him being very, like, smooth and flirtatious, where he's like, oh, I'd be lucky to date some beautiful women like you and have you take care of me. They're like, and they pay him some money. They're like, oh, no, go ahead and keep it. It's just like, wow, he's very smooth talker. They go back to the house, and I love that the guards there are like, yo, so that's the grandson? And it's like, yeah, should we really let him stay here? And it's like, well, Renji was kind of like, let it be, so I guess so. I'm also surprised you let him just go to Yoshino's room. I was like, that's not going to be an issue? Okay. But he's sitting in a room, which I was almost wondering, like, has he never been inside of a girl's room, or is it specifically because it's Yoshino's room? But yeah, she has these charms that she used to handcraft, and he took one specific one, and she's like, oh, you can have it. He's like, really? And she's like, yeah. She was actually offering to give him a newer one, but he didn't take it. So, there's also the thing with Now, which ultimately led to her reaching out to Kirishima. It's like she was talking to one of her friends about... Because there was like a nasty rumor about Kirishima that was introduced earlier in the episode, that there was a girl that he basically was last seen with, where she went from being like an actor to like a pinup model to being in a porno, and then sometime afterwards she disappeared, but like around that time she was last seen with Kirishima. So there's kind of like some nasty rumors in that regard. But there's some stuff that ties to her ex about like what family he's associated to. She's like, oh, I had no idea, but she's thinking like, no, I knew exactly what family he was associated, like who he was associated with. She's like, it's like one of the major reasons I started dating him in the first place. So it's interesting too, because like Kirishima did say like, oh, like you're not speaking your mind, because I guess he always known Now to be the type of person that would speak her mind. But she's like, yeah, that's kind of fine in America. In Japan, you kind of have to keep your mouth shut, which I'm like, yeah, she's just keeping up appearances, doesn't want anyone to kind of see like her rough interior, I guess, and like see her who she really is. So ironic, considering like it feels like she might be a little more herself around Kirishima, who seems to kind of be not himself around anybody. It seems like he keeps that a lot more, that card tucked away a lot more than even Now does. So I think that's interesting. I think some elements of who he really is creeps out when it comes to Yoshino, but even that's just a performance. Once again, he's very particular about what he lets slip, how much he lets that mask slip. But anyway, like, I do correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going to misremember this, but like there was some stuff tied to her to Nao's ex, where it's kind of a thing of some people getting mixed up in something. It might have been something about a girl disappearing, or it might have even been disappearing. I don't remember the context. It was something not scandalous, but kind of like, oh, you need to be wary of it. And she was suggesting to Now, like, oh, you should have someone kind of play the role of your boyfriend, someone tough and scary. And that's how she got in contact with Kirishima. But she was like, oh, Kirishima, I just wanted to see you, when she sees him later on. Well, seemed like they banged it out, considering like, well, she's just wearing a large shirt. He was shirtless. So you're like, oh, it seemed like you banged it out at the hotel, which I wasn't expecting that to happen. But I'm curious. Like, why is she not... Once again, neither one of them is willing to play their card. So he's definitely after some, and I guess she's playing coy about why she wants to keep him around. I mean, I guess it's the thing of, right, you're just that person that, like, a lot of those tingling feelings come back now that he's kind of in the picture again. So maybe that's all it is, just kind of your lust kicking into overdrive, or maybe you're trying to use this as a subtle way to like draw him in. Because ultimately, he leaves Yoshino and Shoma, which I love that Yoshino was talking to Shoma, and then she takes a step back and she's like patting Kirishima on the back because she's trying to like balance everything out. Because she knows how jealous he can be, so she's thinking like, oh, I gotta be on pins and needles, I gotta be showing him attention and not as much to Shoma, and it's kind of a delicate balancing act where she's trying to keep them from like duking it out. But Shoma does bring up something that even Yoshino kind of references, like, oh yeah, Subaki kind of brought that up, was the whole element of you gotta know what's going on with him. And it's like a thing of, well, because she's like, I don't ask him about stuff. If he doesn't talk about stuff, I'm not going to ask about it. So that's kind of like how their whole dynamic is. But yeah, it's the whole thing of you probably should be, because he's like, I think you're getting a little, he's like, you're getting a little relaxed and too careless around him. Where it's like, Yoshino's still like on pins and needles around him because she's trying to understand him, but she doesn't keep her guard up like she's supposed to. And that's what Shoma's worried about, because it's like, that guy is like, none of us have, like, even Shoma seems to have a hard time reading him too. It's like, none of us know what he's really after, so you shouldn't be so careless around him. But yeah, Kirishima says like, oh yeah, I came to Osaka to see you. I came to Osaka to see you. And it's like, oh, he manipulated the situation to do that. But for what, once again, what motives, who knows? But he does get contacted, and obviously now looks at the phone, and it's the picture he got, he got from Subaki last episode of Yoshino in that bikini at the beach, and that's his background. And I'd assume the message that was on the phone was from her as well. He did just say like, right, I don't have a girlfriend, but there is someone that I really like. So I'm sure now it's putting two and two together. So this is a part 1, I believe, what it was saying during the episode. So I'm curious to see. I'm really curious to see what. It's so interesting that they would set it up like that. That it would be. It's not as much of like a to be continued, but for this to be considered like a part 1 or part 2 is kind of interesting. So I'm curious to see like unravel what the rest of this about, like what Kirishima's trying to get from now, like what this whole storyline is going to be, and obviously eventually Yoshino's going to find out. And what her reaction is going to be. I mean, it seems like, well, at this point, you seem like she probably wouldn't care, but just the fact is he's keeping it secret and stuff like that. But it might be a thing of her finding out he's fine with, because he's like, yeah, this is what it really is, and maybe he'll reveal to Yoshino before anyone else what the truth of the matter is with this whole now situation. So we'll ultimately have to wait to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.